Imagine being an 8-year-old girl, denied entry to a school just blocks from your home, simply because of the color of your skin. This wasn't a rare occurrence in mid-20th century America, it was the law in many states, a stark reality that defined the lives of millions. In Topeka, Kansas, in 1951, this injustice became the focal point of a lawsuit that would reshape American society. It was here that a father, Oliver Brown, decided to challenge a system that forced his daughter, Linda Brown, to travel a mile to a segregated black school, bypassing a white school only 7 blocks away. This single act of defiance ignited a legal battle that echoed the pleas of countless families across the nation, culminating in a Supreme Court confrontation that would forever alter the course of civil rights. For decades, racial segregation in the United States rested on the foundation of separate but equal, a doctrine cemented by the 1896 Supreme Court ruling in Plessy v. Ferguson. This decision, which upheld racial segregation in public facilities, effectively nullified the promise of the 14th and 15th Amendments for African Americans across the South. In places like Topeka, Kansas, an 1879 state law permitted, but did not require, cities over 15,000 residents to maintain separate elementary schools for black and white students. While Topeka's high schools were integrated, its elementary schools remained rigidly segregated, perpetuating a system designed to maintain racial hierarchy, not true equality. The NAACP understood this doctrine was inherently flawed and began a decades-long campaign to dismantle it. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or NAACP, had been waging a strategic legal war against segregation since the 1930s. Led by the brilliant chief counsel for the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, Thurgood Marshall, born in 1908 in Baltimore, Maryland, the organization meticulously built a series of cases challenging segregation in graduate and professional schools. Cases like Sweat v. Painter and McLaurin v. Oklahoma State Regents in 1950 chipped away at separate but equal, demonstrating that even seemingly equivalent facilities could not provide an equal educational experience. By 1951, this relentless campaign had reached the U.S. District Court for the District of Kansas, with Oliver Brown's case at its forefront, a deliberate shift to directly challenge elementary school segregation. Oliver Leon Brown, born in 1918, was a welder for the Atchison, Topeka and Santa Fe Railway and an assistant pastor at St. Mark's AME Church in Topeka. He became the lead plaintiff not because he was the first to join, but reportedly because his name appeared first alphabetically among the 13 parents who filed the class action lawsuit. The NAACP also strategically chose a male plaintiff, an upstanding African American father, believing it would be looked upon more favorably by the courts. His daughter, Linda Carol Brown Thompson, then an 8-year-old third grader, represented the human cost of these discriminatory policies. Their challenge, along with 4 other consolidated cases from South Carolina, Virginia, Delaware, and Washington, D.C., presented a united front against segregated education. Crucial to the plaintiffs' arguments were the groundbreaking social science findings of African American psychologists Dr. Kenneth B. Clark, born in 1914, and Dr. Mamie Phipps Clark, born in 1917. Their famous doll tests, conducted since 1939, presented black children, primarily between the ages of 3 and 7, with identical black and white dolls. When asked which doll was nice or which looked bad, a majority of black children preferred the white doll and assigned positive characteristics to it, while describing the black dolls negatively. When asked which doll looks most like you, 44% of children even picked the white doll, some becoming visibly upset. These findings provided undeniable evidence that segregation inflicted profound psychological harm, fostering a sense of inferiority in black children. In June 1951, the Brown v. Board of Education case went to trial in the U.S. District Court for the District of Kansas. Despite compelling testimony, including Dr. Kenneth Clark's presentation of the doll tests, the 3-judge federal district court ruled against the plaintiffs. While the court acknowledged that segregated schools had a detrimental effect upon the colored children and noted substantial equality in tangible factors like facilities, curriculum, and teachers' salaries in Topeka, it felt bound by the Plessy v. Ferguson precedent. The court's hands were tied by the established legal framework, forcing the NAACP to escalate their fight to the highest court in the land, where the question of constitutional equality would finally be addressed without the constraints of prior rulings. The consolidated cases, including Brown, first reached the U.S. Supreme Court for oral arguments on December 9 to 11, 1952. Thurgood Marshall, representing the plaintiffs, passionately argued that separate but equal was a legal fiction that inherently violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. However, the 9 justices were deeply divided. Some, like Justice Stanley F. Reed, harbored reservations about overturning decades of precedent and infringing on states' rights. The court was unable to reach a decision, reflecting the immense legal and societal implications of the case. In June 1953, they requested re-argument, specifically asking for more historical context on whether the 14th Amendment's framers intended to prohibit segregated public schools, a pivotal moment that set the stage for a new Chief Justice. The landscape of the Supreme Court dramatically shifted in September 1953, when Chief Justice Fred Vinson, a supporter of the Plessy verdict, died suddenly. President Dwight D. Eisenhower appointed Earl Warren, the former governor of California, as the new Chief Justice. Warren, born in 1891, arrived on the bench determined to forge a unanimous decision, believing that a divided court would only embolden resistance to desegregation. He skillfully navigated the justices' differing views, emphasizing the moral and psychological harms of segregation over purely historical legal interpretations. His leadership proved instrumental in uniting the court, setting the stage for the historic re-arguments in December 1953, where the fate of segregated schools would truly be decided. On May 17, 1954, a hushed Supreme Court chamber listened as Chief Justice Earl Warren delivered the unanimous 9-0 decision in Brown v. Board of Education. The court declared that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal, thereby striking down state-sanctioned racial segregation in public schools. This monumental ruling partially overturned Plessy v. Ferguson, fundamentally redefining the meaning of equality in America. Warren's opinion famously cited the psychological findings of Dr. Kenneth Clark, stating that segregation generated a feeling of inferiority as to their status in the community that may affect their hearts and minds in a way unlikely ever to be undone. The decision was a legal death blow to Jim Crow in education, but the implementation remained a daunting challenge. The initial Brown I decision did not provide specific instructions on how to end segregation, prompting the court to request further arguments on implementation. On May 31, 1955, the Supreme Court issued Brown v. Board of Education II, famously instructing states to begin desegregation plans with all deliberate speed. This vague directive, intended to allow for local adaptation, inadvertently fueled massive resistance, particularly in the Deep South. Many Southern leaders embraced strategies to frustrate desegregation efforts, leading to protracted legal battles and, in some cases, the closure of public schools to avoid integration, with white students often redirected to private academies. The promise of Brown would take decades to even partially fulfill. The years following Brown II were marked by intense conflict. In September 1957, President Eisenhower was forced to send federal troops to Little Rock, Arkansas, to ensure the safe entry of 9 African American students into Little Rock Central High School, highlighting the fierce opposition. 6 years after Brown, many Southern schools had made no moves toward desegregation, and a decade later, less than 2% of Southern African American children attended desegregated schools. However, Brown served as a powerful catalyst for the broader civil rights movement, inspiring protests and legislative action that led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, eventually forcing a more rapid pace of desegregation. By the late 1960s and 1970s, significant progress had been made, with the number of black students in desegregated Southern schools rising dramatically. This period saw substantial gains in academic achievement and high school completion rates for black students. However, the legal landscape continued to evolve. In 1969, the Supreme Court, in Alexander v. Holmes County Board of Education, finally declared that all deliberate speed was no longer permissible, demanding immediate termination of dual school systems. Yet, the fight for true educational equity persists. By the 1990s, progress stalled, and achievement gaps widened. Today, many schools across the nation are experiencing resegregation, reminding us that the legacy of Brown v. Board of Education is a complex, unfinished chapter in American history, requiring ongoing vigilance and commitment to its foundational principles.